So setting it 0. All right. So welcome to the Saturday morning call. It's evening time on Friday in the States. And so I welcome all. We've got 8 people on the call now. And there's been a request for both delusion and also dependent origination. Now, funny thing is that they're both basically the same thing. That I'd like to start off with a small point. Don't want to spend too much time with it, but when we're talking about dependent origination, we're talking about the second noble truth. And we're talking about the Four Noble Truths. We're talking about the most important, in fact, the real teaching of the Buddha that we've recently run across, even a new sutta that I didn't know, to where the Buddha talks about a whole lot of stuff that he doesn't talk about, including where the Buddha, what happens after death, and where does the Buddha go, and all kinds of belief systems. And that what he does teach is basically the Four Noble Truths. Now, we do know various suttas where he says that he teaches only one thing, both formally and now, and that is dukkha nirodha, which basically is just a shorthand way of saying the Four Noble Truths. Now, one of the qualities of the Four Noble Truths that I'd like to speak with let us say, in regard to Western Buddhism, is Western Buddhism tends to ignore the Four Noble Truths. It tends to ignore the real teachings of the Buddha and instead talks about a lot of stuff that the Buddha doesn't talk about. An example of that would be insight meditation, or vipassana meditation, or mindfulness meditation. You probably heard all 3 of these in relationship to various advertisements and things like that. The Buddha also did not teach retreats, that that's a Western kind of thing. And another one was you hear the word metta quite often. The Buddha didn't teach metta either. That in fact you can think of metta as more of an outcome of correct practice, in the sense that if you can begin to nurture yourself, if you can begin to practice correctly to gladden the mind and to have wholesome thoughts, then when you go out into the world, you will tend to continue to have those wholesome thoughts and nurturing for other people. But sitting down and trying to make a practice out of metta is not what the Buddha taught at all. Another thing that is important about Western Buddhism is that the Buddha never dealt with money, charged money, asked for money. In fact, there are several of the places, including the precepts. The 10th precept is not handling silver and gold, which also has to do with land and ownership of animals and property, slaves, all of that kind of stuff that was considered property in the time of the Buddha. And yet what you'll find in Western Buddhism is building retreat centers and financing building retreat centers and wisdom publications and Berry Center and Spirit Rock and all of these other places where people are actually not in the realm of the teachings of the Buddha at all. It's almost like we need another word. because the real teachings of the Buddha, then generally what I do use is I use the teachings of the Buddha as opposed to Buddhism or Buddhist. That you can think of, in fact, that when I use the word Buddhism and Buddhist, I'm using it in a broad general sense that also includes all of those people who don't have a clue about what the Buddha taught, but they think that they do. And that's where you can find the realm of Western Buddhism is that they generally don't have a clue. One of the hallmarks, by the way, of them is that for those Western Buddhists who have ordained, generally they've only been ordained for a few months, and then they couldn't handle it. They left, but they took away with them enough stuff to sell. And so that's what has come to Western Buddhism. I've also mentioned that all over Asia, when Buddhism was spread all over Asia, it was spread by monks. It was spread by the noble Sangha, who had a much better chance of understanding what the Buddha taught. But Western Buddhism was spread by lay people who didn't know what the Buddha taught. That there's various layers of it, and you can say that you have to dig down quite a lot of Buddhism to get down to what the Buddha actually taught. Now, one of the reasons for that is because over the centuries in India, it was downright dangerous to teach the actual teachings of the Buddha, the liberating part, and the reason that it was dangerous is because it, let us say, cut into the income of the Brahmins and those who did want to make money off of whatever religion that they were teaching. And so I would like to remind you guys that you're actually quite fortunate now that the actual teachings of the Buddha, the supramundane Dhamma, is actually making it into the West. This actually is quite fortunate, because otherwise Western Buddhism was doomed to be just another religion at its best. But that's actually quite a step up to actually become a religion. Right now, what it is just a whole group of independent charlatans that are trying to make some money off of it, knowing that people are interested and curious. And so today we're going to talk about what the Buddha actually taught. And what he actually taught was the Four Noble Truths. Now, the first part about the first noble truth is that there is dukkha. Now, Robert, an old student, just sent a quote from Vladimir Putin, who said that life sucks. Basically, is what he was saying. Is that it's terrible, it's despicable. Life itself is full of problems. In that regard, why not let's just continue to make problems? He also said in that realm is that the only thing that we have is kind of a distant horizon, and that we should cherish some distant horizon because maybe way off into the future, there's going to be a brighter day. But that's the common belief, isn't it? Putin's not alone in that. And that's a complete misunderstanding of dukkha. In fact, one of the ways to better understand it is that when we create a mess, when we create dukkha, when we create dissatisfaction, and then we see that dissatisfaction, the wisdom would say, stop doing those things that create a mess, to do those things that cause dissatisfaction. Stop, rather than, oh, well, that's just permission to continue to make a big mess. And so we can say then that continuing to make a mess because there's already a big mess is what ordinary people do. That's their belief system. or they're trying to fix it in the sense that the mess is out there in the world. The mess is in Ukraine. The mess is in the government. The mess is in the religions. To where the reality is that the mess is inside of each person's own mind. That Vladimir Putin has made himself unhappy, and he's blaming it on all the things that he doesn't like, wanting them to be better, thinking that he'll feel better, that distant horizon will come if only people would do things the way that he wants them done, as opposed to recognizing, just like each one of us, that we have to make that change ourselves, that this is in fact what the second noble truth is really all about. Now, the words that are used is lobha, moha, dosa, and that can be translated as wanting things and wanting to get rid of things and doing it delusionally. That the delusion that we're speaking about here is that the problem lies outside. That's the delusion. To where the reality is that all the problems that anybody ever had, all the dissatisfaction is coming from the inside. That's the second noble truth. Now, one of the things that even if somebody mentions the Four Noble Truths, they'll gloss over the third noble truth, and I want to make sure that you understand that the third noble truth is immediately available to you. What is that? Freedom from dissatisfaction, freedom from continuing to make a mess. Just stop. And if we stop making a mess, things will clear up all by themselves. Then, in fact, things that clear up all by themselves is, guess what? The mind. If you just stop making a mess, the mind will straighten out. But we need to make a bit of a change in there, that in fact the fourth noble truth, whenever it's discussed, they fail to mention that right noble effort to make a change is what makes the change. The stopping of the mess takes some effort to do because we're on a roll. Once we start making a mess and making another mess and making more mess and making more mess after that, we've got making a mess wired. So why not go for it? And that what we really need to do instead is to see that we're making a mess and to put a stop to it. Gladden the mind, brighten the mind, see things from a perspective that distant horizon is right here now. It's right in front of us. All we have to do is to turn away from our disappointments and our struggles and our mess that we make and stop making the mess. Start putting the mind in a better frame of mind. Now, many people look at two opposites in the sense of pessimism. Everything is negative. Everything is bad, which is the general place that people are. And then there is the positive, the Pollyanna, the optimistic position. But the middle path is real. The middle way between optimism and pessimism is this is real. Now, the important part about real is kind of marvelous. We don't have to have the power of positive thinking. It's much more powerful to have real thinking, to see things the way that they really are. And one of the most important qualities of reality right now is everything's okay. Nothing is attacking you. You're all right. Santiago, are you all right now? Yeah, okay. Ben, is anything attacking you now? Is there anything to be afraid of right now? No, everything is marvelous right now. So, in that regard, what we're doing is we're learning to see not just what's there in the sense of the dukkha, the dissatisfaction, seeing the delusions. There's another way of looking at it, and the way of the Buddha to look at it is to look to see what's not there. To look and see what's not there. All right? There is nothing attacking you right now. That's not there. There's no problems right now. An example of that would be that so the knee itches. Well, what about the rest of the body? When the knee itches, we pay attention to the itching of the knee, and we fail to realize that the whole rest of the body is not itching. Isn't that marvelous? We're not itching all over. What would it be like to itch all over? And we're not itching all over. We just have one place where it's itching. And so paying attention to what's not there winds up being quite marvelous, because look at all the things that could go wrong that don't go wrong. Start looking at what's not there, and you'll find out that almost everything that could possibly go wrong didn't. And everything right now is kind of okay. One example of that, by the way, is that on YouTube and in other places, they're talking about how Donald Trump is slashing this and slashing that. One of the things that keeps coming up is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and yet the point is that he hasn't cut them yet. He can't cut them. They're in there by law. Even though he wants to cut them, he can't do it. And yet we don't look at it, well, he can't do that, those kind of dangers are not there. Instead, people freak out, they pull their hair out, oh, he's trying to cut Social Security. In fact, he can't do that. So these are various examples of what's not there. And that when you get down to the point that basically there's nothing left to be there, then that's delightful. There's nothing there. There's no problems, no worries, no fuss, no mess, no dissatisfactions. Can we not delight in that? This is what, in fact, the whole point about being the sotapad, the one who enters the stream. And by the way to look at that entering the stream is the stream of reality, not a stream of consciousness. That's what we're jumping out of. We're jumping into the stream of reality, which means right here, right now, the stream, the flow of reality is kind of okay. All the dangerous stuff is either all in the past or all in the future. And so we can also see then that the middle path is the middle way between the past and the future, which is right now. This is what the Buddha taught. He didn't teach about, oh, you got to meditate hard, you got to meditate better, you got to do this and do that in order to get the results. Oh, no, the results are immediate. The results of the correct practice are immediate as soon as you see that you're deluded and that you can change your mind. As soon as you see that you're in the past, you can come directly to the present moment where there's no problems. Now, that's the third noble truth, is that peace and quiet, nibbana, everything that you would want is in that emptiness, that lack of stuff. We keep dwelling on what's wrong rather than dwelling on what's not there. If we start dwelling on what's not there, there's nothing left to fuss and fret about. And that's the delusion we have. The delusion is that we fuss and we complain about stuff that's not really there. Isn't that amazing, Nick? All right. So, the fourth noble truth is that there is a direct method. They call it the Eightfold Noble Path, but the word path is misleading. And in fact, the word path is so misleading that people think that it's a path. In other words, Putin's horizon is way off into the future, and we've got to find a path to get to that horizon. To where, in fact, a better translation would be the word method, because the method can be applied right now. And so, if we apply the Eightfold Noble Method, it's immediate. It happens right here in this present moment. And the way to get started with the Eightfold Noble Path is to remember to look at what the mind is doing, to remember to look that you're making all that shit up. You're making up delusionally all the problems of life. And when we stop doing that, that means that we're taking the right noble effort to stop doing it. That in fact, what we need to do is to brighten or gladden the mind, change our attitude from a pessimistic attitude to a reality-based attitude, that everything is really okay. So I'm not going to go deeply into the Eightfold Noble Path today, other than saying that those first three items of the path run and circle around each other, and that is remembering, that's sati, and that's the basis of mindfulness meditation, to look at what's going on, which is the basis for insight and vipassana practice. But none of them have that third item, is right noble effort to change right here, right now. That in fact, if you keep looking and keep seeing all your dukkha and get deep insight into the dukkha, you're going to wind up in quite a mess. They call it the dark night of the soul, though it's not really a dark night of the soul. That's actually just a theft of some Christian problem where they don't see any way out, to where right noble effort is in fact the way out. So let's go back now to the second noble truth and look at it in great detail. What is the cause of dukkha? And that the Buddha had a system of looking at how the mind starts off in that delusional system, build up a whole lot of memories based upon delusion, based upon getting it wrong, making a mess, making another mess, and then we pile a bunch of messes on. They all get old, and none of them are in the present moment, but we tend to have gotten ourselves into the habit of seeing everything's a mess. So, if we start off in the delusion of making mess, and then we keep piling on that mess, that gives us a foundation to start with. These two things that I have mentioned of delusionally making messes and then getting into the habit of making messes are the first two items on the teaching of dependent origination. Now, what does dependent origination mean? Dependent origination actually means that whenever anything is originated, anything that starts because of a condition. Or another way of saying it in English is cause and effect. And if our foundation is in delusion, and if our foundation is in continuously making a mess, then that's going to condition everything that happens after that. That's our habit system, and that's the way of looking at things, is through delusion. So, whenever we see something, we don't leave it as just what is the sight. We try to make sense out of it. We try to make an understanding of what it is that comes as input. We have a thought, we want to understand it. We hear a sound, we want to know what it is. We have a taste, generally, in fact, most educated people, they want to know what that taste is. Is it a taste of salty? Is it a taste of sweet? Is it bitter? Is it an herb I know? Is it basil? Is it sweet pepper? Is it taste of meat? Whatever it is like that, we want to know what it is that we're eating. When we smell a smell, we want to know what it is. Well, how do we know anything is based upon experience? In other words, when I mention a tree and talk about a tree, everyone will have a tree as an image in their own mind. They'll see a tree, but it's probably not the tree I'm talking about. It's one that they know. It's one that's stored up in their mess base. So, if we continue with that, we'll continue with making a lot of mistakes, making a lot of messes, but at least we understand, except that the understanding now is just a new delusion. And so we'll put that in our delusional memory base. By the way, the Pali word for that delusional memory base is sankhara. And it's delusional because it's based in ignorance. Now, the word ignorance, or the Pali word ajiva, is actually better understood to be not pure ignorance or wise ignorance. It's foolish ignorance. What's the difference? The difference is wise ignorance. You know that you're ignorant. You know that you don't know. Delusion is that you don't know and you think you do. That in fact, when we have a delusion, it also creates a thing called confirmation bias. What is confirmation bias? Means that anytime that we see evidence of our delusion, then we'll confirm our delusion. And any evidence that we see, reality for instance, that doesn't confirm our delusion, we kind of ignore it. Hello, Benny.
Hi, Dhammarato. Hi, guys.
All right, so that's confirmation bias. Now, another quality of confirmation bias is that people tend to cling more strongly to their delusions than they do reality. For instance, if you get yourself into an argument and you know you're right, you'll tend not to want to argue with the person. But if you're not quite sure of your argument, you'll get all blustery and fussy and do whatever you can do to try to convince the other person that you're right, because if you can get them to confirm your bias, then you feel better. And that's the source of all arguments, is that both people are wrong. If somebody is absolutely correct and knows it, you don't want to argue because he knows. But if we have delusion, then that delusion is piled on to the point of confirmation bias, and then it is piled on to what we will then call a belief or a belief system. And belief systems are quite dangerous because they're tenacious. They're built on a lot of stuff that we've done over time. And so the Buddha teaches this a dependent origination so that we can see that we, in fact, are making up most of the stuff that we consider reality without actually investigating to see what actually is reality, because we have all of these confirmation biases. We think we know, when in fact we don't. All right, now all of these confirmation biases is put into the Paticca Samuppada. In the Pali word is nama rupa. And what we mean by nama rupa is that we'll see something real on the outside, and what we'll do it is we'll take what's real from the outside and mash it into our belief system. We'll mash it into our delusion to make sense out of it, because our sense systems our making sense of things, our understanding of things is part of the delusion system. And so reality, as long as it fits in with our delusional system, we'll believe it. But if reality doesn't fit into our delusional system, then we tend to reject it and cling to our delusional system. Isn't that amazing? In other words, humans are not interested in the truth. They're interested in confirming what they believe. All right? Which means then that every time that we see, hear, touch, taste, smell, or even think about something, it's got to fit into our belief system. And then we make up a story about it. And that story in the Pali is called Salayatana. Now, the word atana is actually the senses, but Salayatana means an internal sense, a story that we're telling about reality that's based upon all of our delusional systems. Well, guess what, folks? As far as teaching, or as far as understanding and learning Paticca Samuppada, it's not a great big buggy bear that's hard to understand. We're halfway through already. So let's take a moment and make a review to see that we start off as a child, not knowing. We're ignorant as children, but as soon as we think we know something as a child, like Mommy said so, then we start building delusions one after another after another. I just shared with Mikey yesterday one of the old delusional systems that I had. My mother taught me, and that was the phrase of Smarty Marty had a party, and nobody came but Smarty Marty. Has anybody ever heard that? Wow, she told me that, and it cut into me like a knife, which basically says, don't have any parties because you'll be disappointed. Nobody really likes you at all. You're a smart ass. And here I grew up my whole life been a smart ass. And nobody comes to my parties. All right? Now, that little phrase that she taught me, and she didn't say it just one time and it stuck. I heard that from her over and over again. I think every time that I came up with something brilliant, she'd say that. In fact, it was her that wouldn't come to my party. She didn't like it that I was smarter than she was, or that I could see more clearly than she could. That's especially dangerous for a mommy who's got a 4-year-old who can outsmart her, and yet every 4-year-old I know outsmarts their mommy. That's why they put so much pressure on us, put us in a pressure cooker to conform to mommy's reality. She don't like it when you can see things better than she can. All right? So that delusional system gets started when we're children, and then we see everything through that delusional lens, which means then that all of our memory base is based upon delusion. Then when we see something in the present moment, we try to make sense out of it based upon our delusion, and we come up with a story. All right? That's how it operates, is that what we see, we don't see. What we see is what we want to see so that it conforms to our confirmation bias. Now, here's the interesting point. Moving on from there, by the way, does anybody have any questions so far? All right. So the next point is that in Paticca Samuppada, they have the point called pasa, which means contact. And what I'm saying here is that story that we tell, our confirmation bias, the stuff that we make up, that's what contacts us. Not reality, but filtered reality. Filtered reality because we put it to the filter, and what is our filter? All of the old crap. It's like having a filter that's all clogged up, And now you're trying to filter water, and you're not going to get much clean water out of a dirty filter, especially when you're putting dirty water in. So dirty water into a filter plus a dirty filter is going to give you not much clean water. Is that not true? Okay, so we're not getting much reality out of this method because our filter system is all messed up. Hello, Michael. Glad you joined. We just finished talking about the first half of Paticca Samuppada.
So, wonderful.
Congratulations to you for joining, and in order for everybody to understand it in the sense of how interesting it is, I'll go through it one more time. We start off as a child in ignorance. A little child doesn't know anything except what he's taught by his mommy, and what mommy is going to teach the child is a bunch of garbage, her garbage. And so we start picking up garbage as if it's real, and we build up our garbage pile so that in reality nowadays, whenever we see something, we put it through a filter of our garbage. And putting it through a filter is called Dhammarato. We take something that's real and try to name it, try to put it into our understanding, and come up with a story. And that story that we have about reality is what contacts us at a deep level of feeling and whatnot, rather than reality itself. So the whole quality then of this teaching of Paticca Samuppada is to come out of our making stuff up, or look at how we're making stuff up, so that the stories that we make up are much closer to reality. That one of the ways that you can talk about it. Hello, Ben. Glad to see you back. I missed you while you were gone. So the point is that when we make stuff up, we don't know that we're making stuff up until we begin to investigate that most of our thoughts is just a story that we've been making up based upon our delusional system, our confirmation bias. And that's what contacts us. That's what we think is real. It's the story rather than reality. So can you begin to see your process of making stuff up? And by the way, in English, we use the word perception or preception, which means that the process of being able to see is not based upon reality. It's based upon all of our stored old stuff. If you see a tree for the first time, you've never seen any tree ever. You didn't even know the word tree. The first time you see a tree, you don't make much of anything out of it. It's only when that tree fits your belief system that that tree becomes interesting. So it's the interesting things that touch us, and we become interested in stuff. But the stuff that we're interested in is not the real deal, it's what we made up. So whenever anything touches us, that's what gives rise to our reactions to it. Now, we react to things normally with feelings. We react to things based upon whether it's perceived through perception as to whether it's dangerous or not. Is it dangerous or not? If it's dangerous, then we're going to have aversion to it. We're going to have fear. We're going to have anxiety. If we like it, we want to grasp to it. And in a delusional system, that which we want may in fact be dangerous, but we can't see that it's dangerous. Okay, here's an example of what's dangerous. No matter what it is, if you want it and you don't have it, something's missing. If you want something and you don't have it, you're not whole, you're not complete. That wanting tears a hole inside of us. And yet we don't understand that. So we watch TV commercials and we say, oh, I want that and I want this. And all we're doing is making ourselves feel bad. And then we're under the delusion that, oh, if I go get that item, if I go get that car, if I go get that toilet paper, if I go get that girl, whatever it is that I want that I don't have, the delusion is that if I get her, if I get it, I'll be better off. And in fact, the better off was not wanting it in the first place. So, if we can see that we're contacted by the stuff that we want, that it impresses us, it's interesting, then we begin to have these feelings about it. The feelings, by the way, in Pali is called Vedana, and that there's actually three kinds of feelings, according to the teaching of Paticca. The three feelings are, I like it, I don't like it, and then there's a feeling that's mixed. It's either both I like it and I don't like it, or it's a mixture of I don't like it and I like it. But there's always that mixture in there, and that mixture generally leads us to a state of confusion. I'm not sure about whether I like it or not. How many people enjoy the feeling of being confused? Oh no, that's just another form of dukkha. It's being confused. I don't know whether I like it or not. And instead of just leaving it neutral, we want to do more investigation. We want to find out what it is so that we'll know for sure whether to like it and want it, or whether to hate it and get rid of it. That's a feeling, and it's a feeling that would be considered dukkha in the sense of it's dissatisfying. So, at one time, I used to think that there were both good feelings and bad feelings. The answer to that is no, all of the feelings, when ignorant, when delusional, are bad. For instance, if I gain pleasure from something and then I want it and I think I'll be better off if I get it, isn't that a negative feeling? That's dukkha. How about if I don't like something and I'm trying to get rid of it, isn't that dukkha? And if I don't know for sure whether I like it or I don't like it, now I'm confused and I don't like that either. So all of the feelings have to do with not winding up not feeling good. And that's even, just at the state of Vedana, before we go any further than Paticca, we've already got dukkha. Now, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has a concept called wisdom at the point of contact. That if we can see that things contact us, if we can see that we're interested in the stories that we're telling ourselves, we have a chance then of changing the way that we feel about it right then and there. If we have wisdom as opposed to delusion at the point of contact, if we have wisdom, then we can choose to be happy that we don't know and we don't care. We can choose that I like it, but I don't want it. We can choose to, I don't like it, but I can put up with it happily. So wisdom is the point that comes in at the point of contact. Other than that, our Vedana is taking us downhill. It's already going, okay, so let's look at things when they really go downhill. If I like something and I want it and I can't have it, I'm going to start to grasp and cling. For instance, a girl who doesn't have a boyfriend, she's going to go start making up. She's going to have beautiful clothes. She's going to try to make herself beautiful so that she can get what she wants. The guys do the same thing. They go to the gym, they work out. They're not willing to accept themselves the way that they are. We don't like it the way that we are. Rather than recognizing, well, reality is reality. I'm good enough as it is. And accept things the way that they are. We always want to change something, and we go about changing it delusionally. So we grasp and we cling. And that clinging, wanting something, then is what creates the self. If you don't want anything, if you don't want this or that, then there's no cling or. So when there is clinging, when you're clinging to something, notice that grasping hand. That grasping hand is the clinging. And look, it's got an arm. Where does that arm lead? It leads to the self. So if we're not grasping and clinging, there is no arm, there is no self. But when we want something, we delusionally create a self. Now that self then winds up in one of four desperate places. They call these the woeful states. If we get angry, we get hot, that's hell. If we want something and we keep grasping and clinging for it, that's called the pitta, or the hungry ghost. We're always hungry. We want more and more and more, and our mouth is not big enough to satisfy the hunger. Or the third one, which in fact in Western civilization is the most common, and that is the dumb animal, the ignorant animal, the delusional animal who does what he is told to do and doesn't like it. This is basically what we mean by the stick, that we from childhood are driven. Every child that I've ever met, every child that I know was driven into school. Why? Nobody likes it. Maybe the first day or two, but day after day after day, I can even see my daughter. She does not like to go to school. I didn't like to go to school. Anybody here actually liked going to school for their whole life? Nobody's raising their hand. Everybody went ahead and did what they were told to do, and they didn't like it. That's the state of the dumb animal, the woeful state. Isn't it possible, though, that people can start to do things, whatever they're doing, the very thing that, in fact, you didn't like to do before was already based upon that pile of not liking, but we have a choice. We can begin to like what we're doing. If you got to reinstall Windows, most people, if they have to reinstall Windows, they hate it. Why can't we reinstall Windows and enjoy it? So we wind up hating what we're doing. And the whole world then probably has a job that they don't like, and they want to make a change. And when they get the change, after a week or so, they don't like that job either. Because it's what? It's not the job, it's the mental state that we bring to the job. Ivan, go right ahead.
So wisdom is also cultivated through keep looking, right? Like sati sampajana. So you mentioned.
Absolutely. Wisdom is to take another look. Don't rely upon the story we just made up. Go look for more evidence. Reevaluate. See reality again the way that it actually is, and not put any confirmation bias into it. So anyway, in the teaching of Paticca that creation of the self is what really, really suffers. That delusional system that we've built up means that every bad thing that happens to me. And that's the real nature of dukkha. It's not just dissatisfaction. It's that dissatisfaction, how to say it, that dissatisfactor, the one who creates and enjoys being under the delusion of dissatisfaction, is the self. Now, the Buddha taught something called anatta, and that many people in the West are so confused about it, they think that there is no self, but there is a self and whatnot, that the self is delusional. Basically, what we can say is that the self is not permanent, that our personality is not permanent. We can, by using the Eightfold Noble Path and taking the right effort, we could change our personality and, in fact, completely overhaul it so that we're not the same person that we were before. And then, in fact, when we stop, let's say, grasping and clinging at things, When we stop creating our woeful state, then the level of dukkha that we take personally doesn't exist. So there's a difference between, let us say, an irritation and being stabbed. And the getting stabbed is because of the clinging. We put force into it. And that's what creates the self that's so delusional. And so the cycle begins again. This is the teaching of the Buddha. This is how dukkha starts. Now, here's an interesting point about the second noble truth and why we make sure that people understand that the teaching of Paticca Samuppada is not a separate teaching. It is, in fact, an explanation of how the second noble truth works. If you see Paticca Samuppada as a list of 12 items, the first item on the list is delusion. The last item on the list is dukkha, and right there in the middle is the feelings of wanting and not wanting. Well, isn't that what the Buddha then says, is that second noble truth, the cause of dukkha, is our delusion and our wanting things ignorantly. And so this is how that system operates, is that we pull stuff out of the past to make up a story, and then that story impacts us, leading us into feelings. It's not a difficult teaching. It's an easy thing to understand, especially when you catch yourself doing it. When you can see that you're making stuff up and that that's what you're making your feelings out of, you feel about the stories that you make up. Can you do that? Can you see the stories you're making up? If you can, then you can see Paticca Samuppada. And if you can see the Paticca Samuppada in action, then you can in fact see the teachings of the Buddha. Until you can see that most of your problems is the fact that you made them up. When you do that, you're understanding the teachings of the Buddha. When you can't see it, when you're looking for a horizon, when you're looking for something out there someplace to be the cause of your problems, that's not the teachings of the Buddha. When you have the idea, oh, I can go take a retreat and I'll get some wisdom there, then that's not the teachings of the Buddha. If I say, oh, I'm going to go pay some guru and sit in front of him, and when I feel good enough in front of that guru, maybe I'll dance and say hoo, hoo, hoo if I'm in front of Osho, or maybe I'm just paying out a whole lot of money to sit in front of Jack Cornfield or whatever like that. That is not the teachings of the Buddha. The teachings of the Buddha have to do, can you see that you're making stuff up? And you can stop doing that and start looking at things in reality. So, does anybody, Ivan, you got your hand up, go ahead.
Sometimes it feels like the feeling comes first before the story. Like
Isn't it fast though? I mean, you've got to actually review the story in order to have the story. But you create the story, and then immediately it contacts you, and you immediately feel bad. And while you're feeling bad, you review the story you just told. If you're fast, you can see, oh, it's the story that made me feel bad. The mind is fast, folks, really fast. This whole sequence that I've been talking about, this whole set of Paticca Samuppada, can happen within a second, can happen within a half a second. And then we feel bad, but the feelings, by the way, are slow. Feelings are very slow. Why? Is because our feelings are generally a chemical reaction in the body. But the mind has already sent out the message of through the pituitary and the pineal gland down to the adrenaline gland, and by the time we feel bad, the story has been made up, the story has been told before we are actually started making the feelings about it. Look closely, watch closely, recognize that it's the story that you're telling yourself that makes you feel bad, not the feelings create the story. So Santiago, what do you think?
I think that's great. I think it's like if you got married and found out your wife was cheating on you, and like that's just what they were like, and then you'll make out this story about marriage or whatever it may be and drive yourself crazy instead of seeing things as they are.
All right, well, let me tell you this a little bit about it. That she's cheating on you is an old story that you've got that would be called a Sankara. Okay, so the whole point about cheating is just some story that you were told. That she's your wife is another delusion. Because the idea of I have a wife means that I can control her. Guess what? She cannot even control herself. How do you expect to be able to control her when she can't even control herself well enough to let you control her? Right? And so both my wife cheated on me. That's just two different delusional systems. Look how bad you can feel if you have those two delusional systems. My wife cheated on me. Why can't you see?
By the way, I don't have a wife.
My good friend is out having fun. Ha ha ha. Because that's closer to reality. But when we have it in the concept of, oh, she's my wife, I own her. I've got papers called a marriage license. The government supports that she's my wife. How dare she go off and have fun? And not only that, but she believes the same thing, and so she doesn't really have that much fun. She goes out to have fun and winds up with a guilt trip instead. All because of delusions. And the reality is that she's just okay. Let her go, do what she wants to do. Then, in fact, if you try to stop her, she'll feel like that you're trying to own her, and she'll try to escape even faster. But thanks for bringing that up, Santiago. Do you have anything else to say?
I think I've never been married. They've never been married. I'm just bringing an example.
Not me.
Thank God. Thank God, you know.
How about you, Nick? Do you have anything to say?
No, I think I've said enough lately.
All right. How about you, Michael Swift?
No, I have nothing to say. That was great, Dhammarato. Thank you.
Okay. Do you think that you understand Paticca Samuppada now? Dependently arising.
Yes, this happens, so that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Thank you.
Good. That's a really, really beautiful teaching that the Buddha came up with. When I first learned it, I was all confused because I was getting ordinary views on it. But now that I see how simple and quick and fast it operates, I can say, oh, yeah, that's just a second noble truth. Yeah, we're just creating our shit. We're delusional. That's why we want things. If we were really wise to see things the way that they really are, we'd be satisfied with the present moment.
That's right. Going back to being relatively safe, having relatively enough food, everything's okay. Everything's good enough right now.
Mm-hmm. We have to remember that. We have to remember it over and over and over again because we've got that old pile of stuff that we keep sifting through. We've got habits, folks. So we have to practice it over and over again so as to sort of mollify and change those habits so that the automatic feeling system that we have is, she's not my wife, she's just my friend, let her go play. As opposed to, my wife is cheating on me, because that's the first thing that comes up. That's the way that we were taught. So, Vinny, what do you have to say?
No, great talk. Yeah, it's good stuff. I wish I could put it into practice more, but fantastic, great stuff, Dhammarato.
Remember, Remember to do it right now. That remembering that actually this practice of the Eightfold Noble Path is actually taught as anapanasati, which there brings in the four foundations of mindfulness in the sense of the body, the feelings, the mind state, and the mind's, let us say, stories that we tell. But in fact, we've already touched all of the points of anapanasati in this talk about paticca. So it's an integrated teaching that the Buddha has. It all fits together. It's not disjointed. It's a simple teaching, but it has to be repeated over and over and over again because our habits is the way that we normally operate. I'm actually avoiding the word deep. They're not deep, they're just neurons. And that when you start changing the neurons, they will change. You can actually have some wholesome, happy neurons. But you created a bunch of unhappy neurons by having the same thoughts over and over again. But when you start having a lot of thoughts over and over again that are wholesome and happy, you create new mental pathways in your mind, in your brain. Yes, Paul, go ahead.
Even though Paticca is typically represented as one item moving to the other, seems like it doesn't necessarily go from one to the other. Multiple aspects could get triggered. Say, with a Sankara coming in, it could trigger feelings, perception, and the Salayatana aspect as well.
Yes, you're making an important point. Thanks for mentioning this. When people see a river, they think that the river is flowing downhill. Does the river always, every drop of water, flow downhill? Doesn't it have eddies and swirls and currents and things that are all kind of mixed together? That's actually what happens with Paticca. That in fact we can go to the point of making up a story and not have enough information and go back and get more information to finish our story. And so we can loop around things. We can also go all the way to the point of wisdom and say, wait a minute, I need to go back and recreate stuff. I don't need to go automatically to the feelings. And so there's a lot of eddy currents inside the Paticca. Thanks for bringing that up, Paul.
So you could say that it's not a linear process always. It could bounce around.
It can bounce around. In fact, when we're really young children, it basically bounces around is delusion and sankara building, and delusion and sankara building. We do a lot of it. As we grow older, we don't add so much sankara anymore. We just use the really old stuff.
Okay.
In fact, the stuff that happened to you when you were 4, 5, and 6 years old affects you a whole lot more than the stuff that happened to you in your 20s. All right. Ivan, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
So is it wise to know that right now, the point of contact, there's no wisdom? So like, is it wise to like in the process of like dependent origination when things are going very fast and it's like, okay, I'm not really looking at things wisely right now. So that's wisdom, right?
Yes, that would be wisdom. The wisdom would then be to go back and let's take another look. Let's not just go with the feelings that we've got now. Let's go take another look.
And looking at this, like the river simile, like trying to look at like, not everything is going down, like there's currents and everything. Like those looking is not thinking, right? It's not like I don't know, like is it thinking, like analyzing? It's not that, right?
Well,
it's not analyzing.
You can recognize it with another simile, and that is that neurons just don't go from A to B. They're all snarled around. There's this connection and that connection. There's all kinds of complicated stuff that's going on inside the brain.
Mm.
And the question is, how quickly can you cut off that process that of Viticca Samuppada, so you don't wind up in clinging and in a woeful state. For instance, sitting at your desk and you recognize that you're not liking what I'm doing right now. Can't you just do something new? Like set that pencil down happily and stand up and do a jig and then sit back down on your desk and continue working. Why do we have to build up, I hate this job, I hate this job, I hate this job? Because in fact, that's just old behavior that we've learned.
Because that story feels nice in a way, like it kind of feels like you deserve this, and like this is the delusion that we are talking about.
Mm-hmm. Not liking what you're doing, that's delusional.
Mm.
Not liking your job is delusional. So, Michelle, do you have something to say?
Hi there. I guess my question would just be, what are techniques that you can use to break out of the delusion, I guess?
Well, I'll go over them one time again. And that is, we have to build up the quality of remembering to look at what's happening in the mind. Because if we can't see it, we can't change it. But if you can look and you can see that you're creating your own story, then you can go back and change the story. You can go back and rehash reality, add some new reality into the mix, and change the way that you feel. You can have thoughts like, oh, I don't have to worry about this job. I'm not going to worry. I'm just going to be happy. And add that new thought to the mix.
Right.
So the key point of the teaching of the Buddha is that point in the Eightfold Noble Path called right noble effort. We have to take the effort moment by moment to make changes. So Samantha, do you have anything to say? Here, there, and the other place. How about you, Michael?
I don't have
Yeah, Samantha, go ahead.
other than hello and soon goodbye. I don't really have anything to say.
All right. Mikey, can you help me with what she said?
One of the things I heard her say was she doesn't really have anything to say.
All right, that'll do it. Thank you, Samantha. Michael, do you have anything? Mitchner?
I have nothing to add.
Nothing to add. All right. So I'll ask you, do you understand Paticca Samuppada?
Yes, I do.
All right. Can you use Paticca Samuppada to change your life? I was thinking, but I know the answer. All right. So here's the next question is, do you know that if you stop telling stories, if you stop perception, then that's going to end to the
baby to sleep.
Sorry, what? Go ahead.
I said I'm in the middle of putting a baby to sleep.
All right. Well, 100 years ago, they would use cocaine. 200 years ago, they'd use their boxing glove. I hope now you're doing it with Rockabye Baby. So, here's the last point, and that is when we stop making up stories, that's going to bring feelings to an interesting state of kind of no feeling at all. If you don't have any stories that you're making up, you're going to wind up in a state of not having much feeling about it. Life becomes really interesting when it gets really empty of feelings. If there's nothing to feel, that's marvelous. Wow, there's nothing to it. Now we can begin to see, remember we started this talk about it in the sense of if you have absence of something, now we're looking at absence of feeling, absence of perception. Can you bring it to the point that you stop making up stories and stop having feelings about the stories you make up? Then your life becomes quite delightful. Reality is really good enough. And so the whole point about the teaching of Paticca Samuppada is to stop. So, with that note, let's stop. Does anybody have any final questions, final points? All right,
You just kind of remind.
What was that, Ivan?
No, it just kind of reminds me of Angin Mola, where he was chasing down Buddha, and the Buddha say, "You can stop." Like,
Yeah,
I've already stopped.
Right, he sold Angulimala. I have stopped Angulimala. You stop too. Just stop. Stop making stuff up. Stop having bad feelings about the stories you make up. So, Mikey, why don't you take this thing home?
Yeah, thank you for being here today, friends. Glad to see each of you. And
Been quite a crowd today.
Yeah. Happy to hear about Paticca Samuppada and bringing things to a stop. When you have some time, go visit OpenSanghaFoundation.org and sign up, create an account, play with the website. Also, if you're watching this video on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the like, leave a comment, and feel free to share these videos. Especially
Yes.
if you have friends.
Make comments. Make comments.
Yeah, if you have
Make
friends
comments
that
on
are
the website.
interested.
Make comments on our YouTube channel.
Oh yeah. If you have friends that are interested in things like meditation or Buddhism, there's some real noble Dhamma that you can pass along. So yeah, thank you everyone, and take care.
All right. Thank you. We'll see everybody later.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.